Hi, this is the voice, Michael Chavello. You're listening to the Premium Oddscast, hosted by leading MMA odds maker Nick Kalikas, fight scientist and author of Fightnomics, Reed Kuhn, and MMA journalist Brian Heminger. The absolute best UFC betting info, hits, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting, MMAoddsbreaker.com.
Welcome to the Premium Oddscast, presented by 5 Times Sportsbook. I'm Brian Heminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts oddsmaker Nick Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC 200 event, which takes place in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you're unfamiliar with our format, myself and Nick will break down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Looking back at our last event, our premium package bets for UFC Fight Night 89 went 2-2 to profit 1.52 units overall. We won our underdog plays on Krzysztof Jotko and Stephen Thompson, but lost our underdog plays on Sam Alvey and Leandro Silva. We also won our free bet on Steve Bosse for 1 unit. Back to the present, UFC 200 features a 12-fight card in total and will be aired on UFC Fight Pass, Fox Sports 1, and pay-per-view this Saturday night. Let's dive right in. Now kicking off the preliminary card on Fight Pass is a lightweight contest between Jim Miller, who is 25-8 with 1 no contest, and Takanori Gomi, who is 35-11 with 1 no contest. Now Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Miller minus 245, the comeback on Gomi plus 175. Right now, looking over at 5dimes.eu, our official sponsored sportsbook. Make sure you check them out. Jim Miller's minus 245. The comeback on Gomi is plus 205. So line margins have basically just tightened up. Two-way action coming in this fight to hold it steady a little bit. I'm sure there's more parlays coming in on Miller than straights. And then the straight bets are probably going to come in on Gomi along the way, and we could see it drop slightly. But this is a tough fight for both guys because obviously Miller is kind of a shell of what he was. He's not the same fighter that was once a title contender and realistically a top 5 lightweight for a long time. I mean, he was right up there, but he's kind of battling through father time, and not just that. I mean, he's only 32 years old, but it's fight years, and just that decline spot hits fighters quicker than it does others. Now, Gomi is not young by any means either. He's 37 years old. He's definitely on the decline himself. I mean, a long time ago, he was recognized as the best lightweight out there. He's a dynamic striker, still has that power in his hands that he can put people down for sure. He's gotten better. I mean, the truth is, overall, his ground game's gotten better, his wrestling, everything about his game is actually improved with experience. His weakness, though, is still on the ground against guys that can get him down, take his back, submit him, obviously like that. His chin's getting a little bit weaker now as well. So for Gomi to win this fight, he needs to keep it upright. He needs to sprawl and brawl and try to land on Miller. Miller obviously is not a bad striker in his own right, so he can hang in there with Gomi as well, although I think that would probably favor Gomi, especially at this spot, at this time in their careers, where Gomi is going to be the more dangerous striker. But Miller's a smart fighter. He knows what he has to do to win this fight. He's going to try to look to get this thing to the ground. He's probably going to have success doing so, and if he does, he's going to finish Gomi on the ground. I mean, Miller is a special talent when it comes to his ground game especially. I mean, the people that he submitted and the type of submissions throughout his career have been nothing but impressive. So Miller has a huge edge on the ground. He's going to take advantage of that, and I do think he probably gets the job done here. So I am going to pick Miller to defeat Gomi.
Both of these guys are in a major decline right now. Miller, particular, has not looked good in hardly any of his recent fights. He's been able to pick up a few submissions, but for the most part, he's just getting beat up, and he's running out of firsts. And for a while there, nobody could finish him, and then somebody was the first to submit him, and then somebody was the first to knock him out. There's really not much left that people can do to Jim Miller. But that being said, Takanori Gomi is a shell of himself as well, and he's even more older and battle-worn than Miller. And for the most part, what happens with Gomi is he faces people, and he usually, for the most part, get submitted by really good submission fighters, or if they can get him to the ground, they can just pound him out on the canvas. I mean, even Miles Jury was able to knock him out on the feet, and he's not exactly a big-time power puncher. So Gomi's chin isn't what it used to be. His ground game isn't as good as it used to be. His submission defense isn't very good. But he does still pack a wallop on the feet. I mean, there is still the possibility that he could land that unbelievable knockout haymaker like he did against Tyson Griffin. But you have to remember, people were talking about Gomi practically being done back then, and then he landed that punch, and that was 2010. That was 6 years ago. So Takanori Gomi definitely has not looked great. He's not expected to look great here, and this is more a nostalgia thing. And I think Jim Miller can dig deep enough to go out there and take care of business against Gomi. As long as he doesn't get caught with a big-time haymaker, Miller should be able to outstrike Gomi on the feet and then completely dominate him on the canvas. So my pick is going to be Jim Miller. Now moving up to the middleweight division, we have Gegard Mousasi, who is 38-6-2, taking on Thiago Santos, who is 13-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
I opened Mousasi minus 315, the comeback on Santos plus 235. Right now, looking over at 5 dimes, it is Mousasi minus 295. The comeback is still plus 235 on Santos. So line margins have tightened up a little bit. Got to be honest, I was tempted to open it even higher with Mousasi a little bit here. I know Santos is going to get the respect factor. You got to give him credit. I mean, he's looked like a beast recently. I mean, look at the wins he's had. I mean, it looks great even on his resume right now. His last win over Marcourt, that is definitely a notch to have, even though Marcourt is definitely past his prime, and it probably would have been a different scenario a few years back. His win over Theodoro was impressive. I countered him on that one. I thought Theodoro would be able to grind him out a little bit more. So he's getting better. He's getting harder to take down. He's just becoming a more confident fighter. And then on the feet, he has long range. I mean, he's usually has a reach advantage over his opponents. He's got devastating kicking game. I mean, he's just an outstanding striker, but he does have his flaws. And even though he's looked really good recently and he's getting better and more confident, he's filled out nice, by the way, because at the Ultimate Fighter, when he was on the Tough Show, he was actually fighting at welterweight, and now he's fighting at 185, and he's not small for middleweight. I mean, he's filled out nicely, and he's definitely in the right division, I think, for him. So a lot of good things to see about Santos. He is taking this fight on short notice. He's stepping in for Brunson. So for Mousasi, stylistically, what a change in fight. I mean, with Brunson, obviously Brunson's stand-up's getting a little bit better, but he had to worry more about the wrestling aspect of things. And with Santos now, he's got to change gears entirely and worry more about the striking aspect of things, because I doubt Santos is going to be trying to get takedowns in this fight. So, a tough fight for Mousasi for sure, because if it stays standing, especially what we've seen lately, Mousasi's always been a great striker. Accuracy, toughness, just the way he mixes things up on the feet, precision, everything. I mean, he's got knockout ability for sure. He's always been a very good striker, but he's built his game all around now, and he's more than just a striker. Obviously, he's got a good ground game. His wrestling is extremely underrated, and obviously he's got submissions going along with it. So he's been working hard on that aspect of his game, and it's showed. Now, this fight, recently, like I said, Mousasi has been getting clipped a little bit more than you'd like to see. I mean, not just the Hall fight, but even against Jacare, he was getting tagged in that fight before Jacare was able to finish him. So defensively, Mousasi is a little bit of a concern, especially a guy like Santos. If Santos starts unloading, it's going to be tough for Mousasi to absorb those punches. But I think a lot of people are probably counting out the fact that Mousasi's wrestling game is on point enough where I think he will be able to get this fight to the floor. I think he will be able to control Santos. I think he probably maybe even to finish Santos on the ground. I think he could submit Santos once it gets on the ground. So I know Teodoro struggled getting the takedowns against Santos, and he made life miserable. Santos made life miserable for him. I don't think Mousasi's going to struggle as much, even though it's not going to be easy. I think Mousasi is going to get this fight to the ground, and he's going to have success doing so. So despite the respect that everybody now has for Santos, including myself, I still think stylistically it's a tough matchup. Mousasi's a very smart fighter. He knows he has to get this to the floor, I'm sure, and he's going to have success doing so. So I am going to pick Mousasi. I think that even if this line tends to drop, the faith in Santos is going to be a little bit, I think, unjustified at this point. This is going to be a real test. If he passes a test against Mousasi, then, you could definitely take things to another level with the amount of respect we give Santos. But this is going to be the decider here. So for me, I'm sticking with Mousasi. I think he's going to kind of deflate Santos's recent wins here and just kind of bring him back down to reality a little bit.
Yeah, Gegard Mousasi, Thiago Santos, if this stays standing, it should be really competitive. Mousasi has that kind of I don't give a crap attitude on the feet at times, and he's able to pull it off because he is so talented with his stand-up skills. very fluid, not a lot of motion wasted in his stand-up and striking, very powerful. But in a pure stand-up battle, Thiago Santos will definitely be competitive. I mean, he has nasty head kicks, good power in his hands, and he can push a high pace, as you saw in the Elias Theodoro fight that kind of put him on the map. And then he also had that impressive knockout of Steve Bosse, who is, now a light heavyweight again. So while this fight will be competitive on the feet, I don't think Mousasi wants to take chances. As you saw in the Uriah Hall fight, he was in there against a guy that could make things competitive in the stand-up. So what did he do? He shot in for a takedown and looked to dominate the fight on the floor. And he did. He was dominating that fight on the canvas, completely owned Uriah Hall in the first round, and then got caught with a kick right to the face as he was shooting in for the takedown in the second round, and then he got finished. So as long as Mousasi mixes things up and works for takedowns and utilizes his full, well-rounded skill set here, he should be in great shape. Thiago Santos is not that good on the ground. Obviously, his UFC debut got completely starched by Cesar Ferreira and finished on the ground. So I would expect that if Mousasi can put him on his back, then he's in big, big trouble. So my prediction is unless Mousasi gets caught coming in, he should be able to get this fight to the floor and win it on the floor. So my pick is Gegard Mousasi. Now dropping down to the lightweight division for the main event of the Facebook prelims, we have Diego Sanchez, who is 28-8, taking on Joe Lauzon, who is 24-12. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Sanchez minus 120, Lauzon minus 120, exactly a pick 'em right now. Basically staying that way. Lauzon is minus 115. The comeback on Sanchez is minus 105. Back and forth action on this fight as well. A lot of split opinions on there. I mean, it's just a close fight, especially with the way Sanchez pushes the pace, and obviously the judges love the guy. I mean, it's pretty impressive what he's been able to do throughout his career. The guy has a ton of heart. I mean, he's got the ability as well. He's got a little bit underrated power on the feet as well. A lot of good things to like about Sanchez. He's just a warrior. He's got that mentality. And man, I mean, you got to respect the guy. He shows up every time. Now, Lauzon, on the other hand, in my opinion, I mean, he's had a heck of a career as well. I think he's a little bit more dangerous in all areas. I think even though Sanchez is definitely good on the ground, I think Lauzon is more of a kind of a submission threat overall. I mean, he's definitely someone you got to be more concerned about, because I think his submission offense is a little bit more dangerous, obviously, than Sanchez. And same thing you could say on the feet. I think even though Diego has a little bit of power, Lauzon's definitely the better striker overall and the more dangerous striker. So Lauzon is the better finisher, but it's going to be tough to finish a guy like Sanchez. I mean, even if you tag him up, the guy keeps coming. Even if you rock him, he's just got no quit in him. So that's what's going to make this fight interesting. I slightly lean towards Lauzon because, again, the scenario that I said, I think he's going to be landing a little bit more shots. I think defensively he's a little bit better. Sanchez's chin is a little bit better, although right now at this point of his career, he is getting tagged a little bit more. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked to see that chin finally, get tested here against Lauzon and get put out. I'm expecting that decline spot to finally really show up against Sanchez here soon. It might even show up for Lauzon. I mean, at this point, you never know, because he's been through some wars throughout his career as well. So either one of these guys are a little bit vulnerable in there. And again, I think a pick 'em around a pick 'em line is fairly close, because if it hits the scorecards, who knows what the judges are going to do with this fight. So I lean towards Lauzon because I do think he's just a little bit better everywhere. I mean, maybe the wrestling aspect of this, if Sanchez could get on top and kind of grind him out a little bit along the way, he could get the nod on the cards. But overall, I think that Lauzon is still a little bit better in the stand-up game and the ground game. I think the wrestling is going to be pretty close, and the scorecards obviously as well. But I still lean a little bit more towards Lauzon all the way. I think that he is the better fighter at this point, and he's still got more to prove and more left in him to actually win some quality fights. I know Sanchez bounced back recently with a pretty decent win over a guy like Miller, but I still think the Lauzon's going to be a little bit too much for him in this spot. So looking forward to the fight. It should be exciting. I mean, these guys are both going to bring it, but I'm going to pick Lauzon.
No fighter has ever been able to accomplish more with less than Diego Sanchez. I mean, the guy does not hit very hard. He doesn't have amazing wrestling. He doesn't have amazing submissions. He just has that never say die attitude, incredible heart, a high motor, and is able to push a high pace in fights. And he's been able to work his way all the way up to nearly the top of the lightweight division. So now, yes, his career is almost over. He's been on a major decline. He had a stretch where he shouldn't have won a fight over about 3 or 4 years. But that being said, Diego Sanchez is always going to be in a fight, especially if it goes to the judges' scorecards, because of that high energy, high pace, high volume attack he likes to throw at his opponents. Now, Joe Lauzon is pretty much better than Diego Sanchez just about everywhere. Lauzon did used to have a conditioning problem, but that really hasn't shown itself in ages, so I think he's kind of put it behind him. It was probably more due to the fact that he was so intent on finishing opponents that he just used up all of his energy trying to put him away, and if he didn't, then he got himself in trouble. And now he's a little bit more patient. Lauzon hits a little bit harder than Diego Sanchez on the feet. He's not a technical masterpiece type of stand-up striker, but Lauzon can definitely get things going, and he has set up a lot of his finishes in his career with his hands. So you cannot underestimate Lauzon's hands and elbows. Now, on the ground, Lauzon is masterful. He's able to utilize all sorts of aggressive submission attacks and is usually able to find something, whether it's an arm bar, whether it's a rear naked choke, you name it, Lauzon is going to go for it. So if Diego Sanchez is looking for takedowns, Lauzon is going to be right in his wheelhouse. And honestly, the only way I see Diego Sanchez really winning this fight is if they just slug it out for 3 straight rounds and it ends up going to a decision. And that's a realistic possibility. I mean, I expect Lauzon to win, but Diego Sanchez has never been finished except by a cut in the 5th round of a title fight against a prime BJ Penn. So it probably won't happen here, but I also do think that with Diego Sanchez getting older and having that wear and tear on his body, that Lauzon might be able to be that first guy to legitimately finish Diego Sanchez if he can, find that perfect opportunity to get a submission or connect with something standing. So I'm leaning Joe Lauzon. I think that he pulls this off, and I think this might very well be the first time Diego Sanchez is submitted. So my pick is going to be Joe Lauzon. Now, kicking off the Fox Sports 1 portion of the preliminary card, we have another lightweight contest between Sage Northcutt, who is 7-1, and Enrique Marin, who is 9-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
Up in Northcutt minus 300, the comeback on Marin plus 220. Right now, looking over at the line, obviously it's going to be Northcutt getting bet up a little bit. Let me see where he's at right now. Current spot is Northcutt minus 345. The comeback on Marin is plus 285. So yeah, I figured they would get bet up a little bit with the Northcutt hype. I guess people don't learn their lessons. No, Northcutt is definitely a talented guy. A young man, I should say, because he's still, I believe like 20 years old. So he's got a long way to go and he's going to keep improving. But right now, where he's at, he's athletic. He's got speed and power on the feet. He's got the ability to finish fights on the ground. He's got decent wrestling. He's got it all. But the problem is, I question his heart a little bit. I question his conditioning a little bit, obviously, and his sub defense. He kind of quit in his last fight. That does bother me a little bit for sure that he has that in him. So if fight gets tough after the first round, Northcutt does become a different fighter. And you know what? That's one of the reasons in the past that we've been kind of warning people about Northcutt. I think the guy does have a lot of potential, but he's just not quite there yet. And the same thing with this fight against Marin. This is obviously a winnable fight for him. The UFC matched it this way because I think they want to get him on track as well. But Marin, if he could survive round 1 against Northcutt, it's going to be a whole other story. I think that Marin could definitely have some success in round 2 and possibly finish him, or even round 3 and finish him there as well. So I don't know. I still don't have that much faith in Northcutt. He's going to be, again, more of a front runner and win this fight early, but Barberena hung on. Barberena's a tough guy, obviously, so he was able to kind of withstand what Northcutt had to throw. I think Barberena is a little bit tougher than Marin, but that being said, I still think there's a way for Marin to get the W here as well. So he's probably is the better fighter at this point overall. I don't like that Northcutt has quit in him. I'm going back and forth on this fight. Obviously, most of you guys could tell as well, because I know this is a winnable fight for Northcutt. And again, the way they matched it up, everything about it, but I really can't pick him until he shows me a little bit more heart and a little bit more fight overall. I mean, quick finishes are fine, especially against the opponents that they're lining him up with, but until he shows me he can go in deep waters and really gets put under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure and come out on top, I'm not going to back him. So I'm going to pick Marin. I mean, again, not a very confident pick, but I do think Marin is still a little bit better overall than Northcutt is. Again, maybe the first round it might not show, but as the fight goes on, if Marin can hang on, he probably gets the job done. So I'm going to pick against Northcutt and go with Marin here.
And while I understand your reasoning behind siding with Marin, I just can't get on board. UFC has Sage Northcutt as kind of their golden child, and I wouldn't think they would put him in this fight if they didn't think he could pull this off. Now, obviously, Northcutt is not a finished product. He's very aggressive on the feet with big-time power, and he's lightning quick, a tremendous athlete with good wrestling and decent submission abilities when he's winning. But as Nick mentioned, when he's losing, or if the fight starts to get extended into the second and third rounds, he can get himself in some serious trouble. That being said, I think that Northcutt can overwhelm Marin here. Marin is well-rounded, but not particularly dangerous anywhere. He has a decent submission skill set, but not overly threatening. He's not particularly powerful on the feet. He just is kind of there, and he's a bit of a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. And I think what's going to happen in this fight is Northcutt's going to be able to keep his distance on the feet and land big, powerful kicks. And if it does go to the ground, it's probably because Northcutt tosses Marin on his head or shoots in for a big-time power double takedown and starts working away from top position. Now, as Nick mentioned and I mentioned, Northcutt's not a finished product. If he gets put on his back, he's going to be in trouble. If he kind of blows his energy in the first round trying to get a finish and doesn't, he's going to be in trouble. So he's not perfect, but I do think that he has what it takes to put away Marin in the first round. So I'm going to side with him, but not confidently. Now, moving down to the bantamweight division, we have the former champion TJ Dillashaw in a rematch against the previously last man to defeat him, Raphael Assuncao. Dillashaw is 12-3, Assuncao is 23-4. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Up in Dillashaw, minus 400, the comeback on Assuncao, plus 280. Right now, looking over at 5 dimes, it is currently Dillashaw minus 440. The comeback on Assuncao is plus 350. So a little bit more action, a little bit more parlays, I'm sure, again, coming in Dillashaw's way. It is a rematch. Assuncao was able to squeak by in a very close competitive decision the first time around. Realistically, different judges could have scored it, for Dillashaw as well if they were sitting there. So it was that close of a fight. But that gives Assuncao a lot of credit and respect as well, because we're talking about Dillashaw, who was the former bantamweight champion, and arguably, again, that was a controversial decision he has against current champion Dominic Cruz. So he is at the top of the food chain and probably will get another title shot in the future, especially if he gets a win over Assuncao. Now, Assuncao has been out for a long time. He's been riddled with injuries, which is unfortunate for him. So that is one angle we have to definitely look at. I mean, how is he going to be with all this time that he's had off, with all the injuries and all the recovery? I know that, he's an experienced vet. He's a great fighter. He's got good backers behind him as well, as far as his camp and management. Everything about him seems to be good for Assuncao, but having all that time off, and since their last fight, Dillashaw has improved quite a bit. More confidence now. He's gonna have a bone to pick with Assuncao as well. He's gonna have extra motivation because he's gonna try to redeem a loss on his resume. So everything is pointing towards Dillashaw here. Now, at the current price, it's tough because if this is a competitive fight, then obviously 440 is going to be too high. So you got to be careful laying that kind of juice against Assuncao, because we just don't know what you're going to see. If Assuncao looks at all what he once did, before he had all this time off, then obviously it will be a fairly competitive fight. The guy is one of the best bantamweights, or at least was one of the best bantamweights out there, and he's so close to a title shot in his own right. So this is going to be interesting for sure. But right now, with all that we know, I mean, stylistically, it's a good fight. These guys kind of neutralize each other out, and Dillashaw is just a step ahead right now, I think, as far as the stand-up game goes. I don't think we're going to see this fight take place much on the ground. And if it does, Dillashaw should be in control a little bit there. And then on the feet, I think Dillashaw is going to be the more effective striker, and I trust him just a little bit more right now. So I am going to pick Dillashaw to beat Assuncao. I hope, for all of our sake, that Assuncao at least hangs in there and makes it a quality type of fight, so we do see him bounce back and maybe eventually make a title run in his own right, because he's such a quality fighter, and it's good for the sport in general. And it's great to have him back at 135 and still be relevant. So hopefully he shows up and does well, but I still think Dillashaw is probably going to beat him here, so I'm going to pick TJ to win.
The last time these two guys fought, it was an extremely close and competitive fight, and it was still very early in Dillashaw's career. I mean, honestly, it was only about 3 or 4 fights into his UFC run, and he was just starting to find himself a little bit. Assuncao, meanwhile, since defeating Dillashaw, hasn't done a whole lot. I mean, yeah, he got the win, and it was crazy close, but then he beat Pedro Munoz in Munoz's UFC debut, and he won a decision in a very competitive fight that probably came down to the 3rd round against Brian Caraway. Now, those are still good wins, but the Caraway win was in 2014. So it's been almost 2 full years since his last performance due to injuries. He just cannot stay healthy. And Assuncao's biggest issue is, while he's been off rehabbing, TJ Dillashaw went out and became the UFC bantamweight champion and beat Browne not once but twice. And honestly, he could still be the champion if the judges saw things a little differently in the Dominic Cruz fight. I mean, that was a crazy close fight too. So I just think that Assuncao is still the same fighter he was when Dillashaw fought him the last time, and Dillashaw is about 2 or 3 times better than he was when they fought the last time. Dillashaw's movement has improved. His technique has improved. He is much less predictable, much harder to hit. He's able to mix in takedowns explosively. I just don't see an area that Assuncao is going to be able to take advantage this time. Last time he was a little more patient and was able to press Dillashaw, and Dillashaw didn't quite have that movement down yet. He was still trying to find himself. So this time around, Dillashaw is angry. I think he wants to make a statement. He's angry that he lost to a close decision to Assuncao the last time that he probably shouldn't have lost. And he's angry that he just lost his title in a fight that he possibly shouldn't have lost. And I think he's going to go out there and just dance circles around Assuncao, find a home, and really punish him. I mean, Assuncao has been knocked out before. It's been a long time, but I do feel that TJ Dillashaw finds a home for that right hand, mixes it up, and really looks great here. And I expect him to win in convincing fashion and then earn another title shot against Dominic Cruz. So my pick is going to be TJ Dillashaw to win. Now moving up to the welterweight division, we have former champion Johny Hendricks looking to rebound. Hendricks is 17-4, and his opponent, Kelvin Gastelum, is 12-2. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted at things so far?
I opened Hendricks minus 210, the comeback on Gastelum plus 160. Right now, at the time of the recording, it is Hendricks minus 135. The comeback on Gastelum is plus 115. Now, the line has been out for a while, and it was staying close to 2-1, and a lot of two-way action coming in on this fight, but bouncing back and forth a little bit. As of today, the line did drop a little bit more, and Gastelum is taking dog money. And it's hard to argue that right now, especially at this point in their career. Hendricks is obviously the more popular fighter, so I think more of the public betting action is still going to favor Hendricks. I mean, obviously the guy's a former champion. The wars that he had with current champion Robbie Lawler, I mean, climbing to the top of the game. I mean, Hendricks throughout his career at 170 at welterweight has been phenomenal. You could even argue he beat George St. Pierre before GSP hung it up. So that's the kind of level Hendricks was at, and hopefully he gets back to at one point. But right now, I mean, based on a couple things, and especially in his last fight against Thompson, he looked awful, in my opinion. I mean, I was shocked that he looked that bad. I mean, you have your typical wrestler versus striker, so you would think, especially the caliber of wrestler that Hendricks is, even though Thompson has good takedown defense, you would think that he would still have success in that fight, or at least implement a better game plan than he did. He looked awful. I mean, Thompson blew him out of the water there. So with a change in camps that Hendricks had before that, I don't know. It's just it's a head scratcher right now. Where is Johny Hendricks at in his career? Did he reach the peak of his career? And now we're seeing a kind of a declined Hendricks at this point. I mean, it could be. It's unfair to really say that, but with the camp change, I don't think that's a good time right now for him to kind of be trying to find new ways of, adapting his style and his game plan, or just his background or his training methods, everything about it. I wouldn't make any changes right now because it was obviously working for him before, but he did that and it's done. And right now we're going to actually see if it is paying off. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe it does help him and he looks better in this fight. But I think at age 32, I mean, we're going to probably see Hendricks kind of hit that decline spot a little bit sooner. We possibly could see it happening right before our eyes. Now, Gastelum, he's had some bumps in the road, of course, as well. He is younger a little bit. I think he has more of an upside to him because he's got that hunger still. He wants to reach the top of the game. He wants to become welterweight champion, and he has a long way to go still. I mean, and especially since he had a setback with Magny in his last fight. That was a war. He made it a comeback at least. I mean, he definitely faced some adversity early on in that fight, but he made it close enough that he almost stole that decision as well. So you got to get him credit there. And Magny's been on an absolute tear. So it's not necessarily a bad loss either, but still a little bit surprising. But the way that he matches up with Hendricks, I mean, you got two stud wrestlers, even though Hendricks has the better pedigree overall, wrestler versus wrestler should neutralize each other out fairly decent. Right now, I trust Gastelum, a little bit more overall because I think he's kind of the fresher fighter and just all the surrounding background stuff that we've seen or happening to Hendricks right now. I don't like it. I think that he's in a bad spot right now in his career, and I think Gastelum's going to really thrive on this opportunity and take it and probably win this fight. So if he hits the scorecards, I'm expecting Gastelum to probably get the slight edge. I think if there's a finish in this fight, it's not going to be Gastelum getting finished. I think he possibly stops Hendricks along the way as well. So I think the better chance of the finish comes with Gastelum. I think the scorecards probably favor him right now as well. So I'm going to pick him to win. I think the early action on, back and forth, or a little bit more people supporting Hendricks was probably wrong, and the late action coming in on Gastelum's probably the smart money. So I am going to support Gastelum as well. I think he's going to pull off the mini upset here and get the job done.
And I agree. Johny Hendricks at one point was the best welterweight on the UFC roster, but people don't always stay on top for the longest amount of time. And he's definitely been surpassed. I mean, Stephen Thompson would maul him in a rematch, and people didn't see that coming at first. I mean, people like myself assumed Hendricks would just utilize his wrestling, and instead he just stood there like a deer in headlights, completely flabbergasted that his opponent would dare stay on the outside and counter him. And it just seems like he's not adapting to the new wave of UFC welterweights. He needs fighters that are going to stand in front of him and that he can clock with that vicious left hand, or that he can take down easily, that aren't going to use a lot of sideways movement. And I think people are passing him by at this point. Now, Kelvin Gastelum is not the best fighter in the welterweight division, but he certainly is on the rise. Even with the loss to Neil Magny, if you went back and watched that fight, I mean, and if you watched only the last two rounds, who do you think would have won that fight? I mean, it was Kelvin Gastelum, and that's never something people would have said about him before in terms of conditioning, especially against a guy like Neil Magny. But it was Kelvin Gastelum that was strong later. So it seems like his conditioning issues are hopefully behind him. My only concern here is that Neil Magny was able to take him down. So if he's able to do it, I'm assuming that the 2 or 3 time national champion wrestler Johny Hendricks will be able to do it. But again, Johny Hendricks did not really utilize his wrestling against Stephen Thompson, and it bit him right in the butt. The big issue for me with Hendricks is not only did he look atrocious in his last fight, but it was after he left Team Takedown, he was kind of running his own camp, and this guy doesn't know how to run a camp. I'm sure he hired some coaches and brought people in and had a nutritionist and everything. And yeah, he was able to make weight fine, but other than that, I mean, he just could not pull the trigger in that fight. So I am a little concerned that he still hasn't quite adapted to being on his own yet. And he's going to have to show me something to prove that he's still one of the elite welterweights. Now, when he's on, Hendricks is vicious. I mean, the left hook can hurt anybody. He almost put out Georges St. Pierre with it. beat Martin Kampmann with it, you name it, and had Robbie Lawler in all sorts of trouble. But and when his wrestling is on, he is able to get top position over just about anybody. He was able to out-grapple Carlos Condit, Matt Browne. I mean, he is a very good wrestler, but he has not been mixing the two well lately, and when he does get top position, he usually isn't able to do anything with it. And I think Kelvin Gastelum is kind of a younger version of Johnny Hendricks. Both of these guys are about the same size, about the same height. Gastelum actually has 2 inches of reach on him. And while Gastelum doesn't pack quite the punch that Hendricks does, I do think that the fact that he is younger and a little bit quicker and a little bit more athletic could play a big part here. I think Hendricks is, becoming a family man. He's just not quite that same level of ferociousness that he used to have. So I'm actually leaning Kelvin Gastelum as well. I think he can just outpace Hendricks over the course of 3 rounds. And if Hendricks doesn't put him away quickly, then I think Kelvin Gastelum can win a decision here. So my pick is going to be Kelvin Gastelum. Now moving on to the main event of the preliminary card, we have a women's bantamweight contest between former title challenger Kat Zingano, who is 9-1, and Ultimate Fighter winner Julianna Pena, who is 8-2. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Zingano minus 160, the comeback on Pena plus 120. Right now, Zingano is the one receiving more support from the bettors because she's minus 175. Pena is plus 155. Not really that surprising. Zingano is a bit more popular than Pena. And Pena's recent performances haven't been that great. I mean, her win, I should say, over Jessica Ai was impressive, and maybe a lot of people aren't giving her the credit she deserves for that win, because Jessica Ai is definitely a talented fighter, despite the loss recently to McMahon as well. I mean, she's right there towards the top of the food chain there as well. So Pena defeating Ai, impressive win. Overall, Pena, though, is just, I think, not as well respected as Zingano overall. Again, Zingano was the type of girl, a lot of people believed that she was going to be the threat to Rousey. I mean, she had a little bit of everything. It wasn't going to be an easy fight, but obviously Rousey derailed that quickly. But still, people believe that she's right up there. She has a win over a current champion, Miesha Tate. She's a well-rounded fighter, really an aggressive fighter. I mean, has the ability to finish the fight on the feet, has the ability to get the fight to the floor and win by submission on the floor as well. A lot of good things going for Zingano, but the matchup with Pena is going to be a tough one. I do believe that Pena has an edge in this fight. I mean, Zingano, again, with her time off, is not sitting well with me. I think Pena is going to have more momentum coming into this fight. And stylistically, how they match up, I mean, Zingano likes to really bully people around. I don't think she's going to be able to bully Pena. Pena, even though she's not known for her striking skill, more of her ground skill, again, getting the fight to the ground once she's on top, has some brutal ground and pound, and is able to finish the fight on the ground as well. I mean, a lot of similarities between these two women, and both of them are definitely, I mean, title contenders for a reason. I mean, they're both that good. But I really think that this fight is more of a coin flip than the current odds indicate. And if anything, Pena should actually have the advantage. Again, she has more momentum coming in on her side a little bit. I think she will probably get the better in some of the exchanges in the stand-up game over Zingano. I think if the fight hits the floor, I wouldn't be surprised to see Pena on top. And I don't think Zingano catches Pena in the submission. It's going to be hard for either lady here, I think, to win by sub. I think they should neutralize each other out here. But I do think that Pena, if it hits the scorecards, she's going to have a slight edge in this fight. And I think if there is a finish at all, I think it's honestly Pena that's going to get the finish over Zingano. Again, that should be neutralized a little bit, so I'm expecting a fairly competitive fight. But I do think that people are underestimating Pena just a little bit, and they're probably overestimating Zingano at this point. With her time off, with what I've seen from her lately, I don't know. I'm not that impressed with Zingano, even though she does hold a win over Tate. I mean, if you look back at her fight against Nunes, she got almost finished against Amanda Nunes in that fight. And then she didn't, I mean, she had her bad moments in that Tate fight as well. She showed a ton of heart. I give her credit for that, but in both cases, but still, I think Pena's a little bit more steady. She's not going to be able to, kind of come back if she gets in trouble against Pena like that. I think Pena will finish the job if that does happen. So I am going to go against the grain here. I think Pena probably pulls off this upset, and it's going to be a big notch on her resume if she does get the win over Zingano. So my official pick is going to be Pena.
Kat Zingano last fought Ronda Rousey and got submitted very quickly by being over-aggressive after being criticized about having a slow start. and she just seems like a type of fighter that maybe gets influenced a little bit by what people say about her. And looking up Kat, she actually had to spend a majority of her preparation for this fight just getting into shape. She was a bit heavier in January and had to lose a lot of weight, and now she's healthy now, but how much better could she have gotten if she had to spend so much time just getting back into shape? Now, Julianna Pena, on the other hand, while she wasn't amazing against Jessica Eye, she was effective, and she was able to win 2 rounds convincingly, get those takedowns, get top position, get on the inside in the clinch, and secure the win. And when you look at Kat Zingano, one of her issues has been the slow starts, like against Amanda Nunes, and the image that I cannot shake from my brain is Zingano on her back, getting dominated by Amanda Nunes and just getting battered with ground and pound. And guess what? That happens to be Julianna Pena's specialty. If Pena gets on top of Zingano, she is going to unleash hell on Zingano with punches. And I expect Zingano, who, while she showcased a lot of heart in the Nunes fight, to come back, and Nunes had gassed herself out, and then Zingano got on top and then put her away. I don't think Julianna Pena lets Zingano off the hook. She's the type of fighter that will just go for it. And you saw in one of her more recent fights, I mean, she secured top position, and it was extremely violent. I mean, basically against Milana Dudieva, she was on top of her, just blasting away for a good solid 2 minutes in full mount until they finally put a halt to it. So Pena seemingly is healthy and ready to go, and I just don't quite know if Kat Zingano is ready to go, especially for an opponent of this caliber who is seemingly knocking on the door for a potential title shot in the future. So I think while Zingano is a great athlete and is very dangerous in the clinch, and if she is in top position, I think Julianna Pena does not let the fight get to some of those positions. And as long as Julianna Pena can get one takedown, I think she can win this fight. So my pick is actually going to be Julianna Pena as well. Now, kicking off the main card, on pay-per-view, we have former UFC heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez, who is 13-2, taking on Travis Browne, who is 18-3-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
Up in Velasquez minus 300, the comeback on Browne plus 220. And right now, at the time of the recording, it has been bet up a little bit. It's Velasquez, or I'm sorry, it's actually about steady. Minus 275 for Velasquez. The comeback on Browne is plus 235. So line margins basically tighten up a little bit. And it was bet up and down a little bit more early on, but it looks like it's kind of holding steady at just under 3-1 across the market. Tough fight, honestly, because, and I'm saying that, and I can't believe I'm saying that, because, I mean, Velasquez was obviously the man. I mean, a lot of people believe that he was the best heavyweight, one of the best heavyweights ever. It's not fair to say that at this point because of his recent loss to Verdum and what he showed in that fight. But, I mean, Velasquez with his wrestling, phenomenal, with his stand-up game. I mean, look at the fights that he had against JDS. JDS, obviously, we all know that he's one of the best strikers, especially in his prime, one of the best strikers in the heavyweight division. And Velasquez just, 2 out of those 3 fights had his way with him. So that's the caliber of fighter that Velasquez is, especially when he's on point, when he's not injured, when he's just mentally and physically there. I mean, Velasquez is such a good fighter. I mean, in all aspects of the game. For crying out loud, I mean, he ended up getting taken down by Brock Lesnar, which was a bit of a surprise shortly, but he managed to get back up. And obviously that was the only time in his career that he had been put in that position or that situation. And he did well even getting out of that. And then of course, I'm just bringing that up because it is a little bit of surprising, but that tells you what kind of wrestling he's got. So wrestling is top notch, but all that being said, against a guy like Browne has pretty good takedown defense. It's not easy to get a guy like Travis Browne on the ground. If anybody could do so, though, it is Velasquez. It's interesting, though, because, again, Velasquez has been injured off and on for a while. It's frustrating. A lot of the fans are just kind of sick of hearing about Cain's injuries and him pulling out of fights, so I understand that. So that is something that we all have to keep in the back of our minds. How healthy is Velasquez, even though he's going to hopefully make this fight against Browne. Are we going to see him suffer or kind of be like the guy that we saw against Verdum? A lot of people could say what they want about altitude, about his ring rust, all that stuff. Still, I have to see him actually kind of look back to par in a fight before I think, okay, Cain is back. And against Browne, it's not going to be easy because, again, his takedown defense is on point. Browne's striking ability, I mean, a prime Velasquez shouldn't have too much difficulty with Browne. I would obviously favor Velasquez in that aspect of the game as well, and he probably will have success against Browne here as well. But Browne's kicking game is tough to deal with. His length is tough to deal with at times as well, and he's got a little bit of power to go along with it. Browne's chin has been a little bit questionable. He's been getting rocks. I mean, he does seem to recover, though, in fights, which is kind of impressive. But I think Browne and Velasquez at this point, I mean, it's kind of a head scratcher. We're going to see who shows up, who's been putting in the work, and who's the fresher fighter of the two. I mean, Browne is, again, going to have a little bit more length overall. He's going to be the taller fighter, a couple inches of reach, and a hard guy to take down. If we see the Velasquez that showed up against Verdum, Browne might steal this thing. So I'm not ultra confident in Velasquez right now, but he has to be the pick because if you look at skill set for skill set, I mean, Cain Velasquez is definitely the better fighter of the two, and really Browne shouldn't even be considering him pulling off an upset. I mean, at this point, but we're just not sure what we're getting with Cain Velasquez. So I'm not that confident in Cain right now. So I am going to pick him to win because, again, I'm going to keep the faith a little bit, but this is going to tell me a lot. If he rolls through Browne, I think obviously he'll kind of raise a notch again overall for me. I think I'll give him a little bit more respect because Browne is probably a tougher out than most people even realize in this fight. But that being said, if he loses to Browne, then I think you can almost stick a fork in him and then think that he's probably hit that decline spot and we're never going to see Velasquez at the point that we did see him once it become a UFC champion again. So that's going to be unfortunate. I'm not sure how this is going to go. I do lean a little bit more towards Velasquez, but not as confident as most out there. And I mean, the line's staying steady for a reason. There is going to be two-way support on this fight from bettors, and there are going to be some people that think Browne could pull this off as well. Just as far as a pure pick, I'm going to pick Velasquez as far as the bet goes. If I was a lot of you guys out there, I would definitely kind of almost stay away from this fight and see how it plays out, to be honest with you. But my pick is Velasquez.
If the Cain Velasquez of old shows up, even 66% of the Cain Velasquez of old shows up, then he should be in really good shape here. I mean, the old Cain could push an insane pace and press his opponent into the fence and just beat the tar out of them. The old Cain Velasquez could land a strike from distance and knock his opponent down. The old Cain Velasquez could shoot in for a takedown and slam his opponent to the canvas and then beat them up on the floor. That being said, we haven't exactly seen the old Cain Velasquez in quite some time. I mean, Cain had a nice little run in the heavyweight division, but I mean, realistically, he beat Brock Lesnar, got hurt, lost to Junior Dos Santos, came back, and then beat Antonio Silva and Junior Dos Santos. And that's been about it. I mean, he just has been so unfortunate with his training and injuries that we probably lost an opportunity to see him at his best for extended periods of time. And if the Cain Velasquez shows up that fought Fabricio Verdum and lost his title, then Travis Browne has a realistic shot. That version of the Cain was slow, was picked apart on the feet, was unable to pick up takedowns, and when they did, got submitted quickly. If Cain Velasquez is sluggish and he's not able to get easy takedowns, you can see Travis Browne pull off what he did against Gabriel Gonzaga and Josh Barnett and then just elbowed the hell out of Cain Velasquez's head and put him out cold against the fence. At distance, Travis Browne is still going to be dangerous with his kicks. I mean, you saw the beautiful front kick that knocked down Alistair Overeem. He's still definitely capable of that. And Travis Browne definitely does pack a wallop on the feet. And Cain Velasquez got the tar beat out of him in the Fabricio Verdum fight. So there is definitely an opportunity here for Travis Browne. I'm just not quite convinced. I don't think Cain would take this fight if he wasn't healthy and ready to go. So I'm expecting at least 60%, maybe even 80% of the old Cain to show up. And I think he can push that high pace. I think he can make Travis Browne uncomfortable, get in his face like Verdum did when he fought Travis Browne. Just unrelenting pressure, and Browne did not react very well to it. So if that version of Cain can show up with the high motor, and it is only 3 rounds instead of 5, then I think Cain Velasquez will be in a very good position to not just win, but win convincingly. So I'm going to pick Cain Velasquez. I'm still a believer in Cain. Now dropping down to the featherweight division, we have an interim featherweight title fight between Jose Aldo, who is 25-2, and Frankie Edgar, who is 19-4-1. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Up in Aldo, minus 130 to come back on Edgar, even money. And right now, looking over 5 dimes, it is minus 115 Edgar, minus 105 Aldo. So, and this line has, again, been kind of floating back and forth, two-way action, a lot of split opinions on this fight. Obviously, Frankie Edgar is a very popular fighter. Not that Jose Aldo is not. I mean, he was the king of the featherweight division for a long, long time. And still, I mean, right now going down as the greatest featherweight champion of all time. I mean, if Conor McGregor does ever jump back down to 145 and make a run, then we'll see what happens there. But this is a great fight. I mean, two popular guys. Again, we're going to see a heavy betting action on both sides here. The first fight was close. I mean, you could argue, different judges probably would have scored it for Edgar, but obviously Aldo won a close decision there. This fight's going to be close as well. I mean, I think mentally speaking, you got to give the edge a little bit more to Edgar at this point of his career, because Aldo obviously coming off of that devastating loss to Conor McGregor after all the trash talk, after all the mental games that Conor played, it did obviously have an impact, and Aldo suffered the first knockout loss of his career. So bouncing back from that, getting his act together and getting back kind of in gear for another interim title fight against one of the best fighters, honestly, in the UFC of all time. I mean, Edgar's up there. What he's done with the lightweight title reign that he had, and just the fights that he's had against the quality competition that he's had. I mean, Edgar is definitely in my opinion, one of the best fighters in the history of the sport. And Aldo's got to face that. I mean, both these guys are legends like that. So it should be another classic battle, but mental games, obviously, again, mental edge should go to Edgar. But as far as overall quality and fight, it's going to be close. It's going to be a firefight. I mean, I've been going back and forth. This is a true pick'em type of fight. It's going to be like that on the scorecards, probably. It's going to be like that in the cage, just across the board. So it's a very tough fight to pick. I know a lot of people are favoring Edgar right now. I guess that's kind of worrying me a little bit, because originally I did lean towards Edgar myself, but again, this is the type of fight that it's easy to flip back and forth on. So right now, I'm going to go with Aldo. I'll go against the grain. It seems like everybody's popular pick is Edgar, and maybe we're counting Aldo out. Maybe he is going to come in here a little bit more hungry, embarrassed by his loss to Conor McGregor, and try to prove a point. Obviously, he is one of the best strikers that we've seen in the sport. I mean, a devastating striker with his leg kicks, with everything, his ability. He's a hard guy to put on his back with that takedown defense, but he is facing just a remarkable fighter in Edgar. So no shock here, whoever wins. I mean, it's going to be that close, but I'll lean a little bit more towards Aldo here. And again, basically kind of going against the current grain right now, but by fight time, we could see Aldo flip back and become favorite. So it's going to go back and forth, I'm sure, overall, but I'm just hoping for an exciting, honestly, a 5-round war. I don't even want to see a finish in this fight. I want to see it go to the cards, and I want to see a fun fight and what we're all kind of expecting to see. So I'll lean a little bit more towards the former champion Aldo.
Jose Aldo's aura of invincibility has disappeared. I mean, this is a guy that had that unbelievable stretch. He was the only UFC featherweight champion. He had basically a 10-year stretch of being undefeated. Just an incredible, incredible champion. And that ended in 14 seconds against Conor McGregor. So Aldo definitely does not have that same aura of invincibility. I mean, Chad Mendes pushed him to the limit when they fought in the rematch. So Aldo looks vulnerable now. And I think Frankie Edgar is actually fighting better than he's ever fought in his entire career. I mean, he completely dominated Chad Mendes when he fought him. Edgar is just on an incredible roll. You've seen him go in there and just do everything that they've asked of him. He beat Uriah Faber convincingly. He crushed Cub Swanson. He crushed BJ Penn. He crushed Charles Oliveira. I mean, he could not have done anything more than they've asked. So I expect Frankie Edgar to go out there and with that newfound sense of confidence, especially with Jose Aldo being vulnerable, I think he can mix it up enough to either steal a decision or maybe even knock Aldo out. Aldo's chin now is a bit questionable. You saw him get rocked by an uppercut against Mendes, and then obviously the one punch against McGregor put him out. So even though Edgar doesn't quite have the power of a Mendes or an Edgar, he's definitely can pack a wallop, as you saw in his last fight. So, speaking for Jose Aldo, though, I know that he is probably super pissed off about losing the title. I'm sure he's incredibly motivated to go out there and return to that aura of dominance, but it's not always that easy. So Aldo is training hard. I'm sure he's going to come in here and be a little more aggressive, but also he's got to work on the defense. I mean, he didn't exactly have the smartest game plan against McGregor, where with the left hand being the area he was the most vulnerable, and then he faked with a right hook and dove right into a left hand. So I expect if Aldo really wants to win this fight, he needs to sit back, be a little more patient, and then go to work with leg kicks on Frankie Edgar. Edgar has been hurt by leg kicks before. Guys like Benson Henderson land brutal leg kicks in fights, and they did some damage to Edgar. They slow him down. Edgar's all about a high motor, high volume, high pace, high action, and that's how he wins fights. And Aldo can kind of even the odds, can keep Edgar from turning it on late if he can take Edgar's legs out from under him a little bit. So if I'm Jose Aldo, I am all about the kicks in the whole first half of this fight. Just make it so Edgar can barely even put weight on him. So that really realistically is Aldo's best chance for victory. Both guys are a bit vulnerable with their chins now, although Edgar has not really been hurt in a fight since Aldo landed a couple nice shots on him when he initially fought for the title. And I think Edgar's learned a little bit since that fight. I think he's started to utilize his wrestling a little bit more in fights. He's mixing things up a little bit. He's using that well-roundedness of his game more. And that's something that I think he can utilize to take advantage of Aldo. Maybe he fakes a takedown and then steps in and cracks Aldo. So I do expect Jose Aldo to be pushed to the limit here. I don't think this is going to be a quick fight. I think these guys are going to really go to war a little bit over the course of 4 or 5 rounds. But in the end, I actually think that Frankie Edgar will be the last man standing here. So I'm picking Frankie Edgar to become the new UFC interim featherweight champion. Now dropping down to the women's bantamweight division, we have Miesha Tate, who is 18-5, defending her title against Amanda Nunes, who is 12-4. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
I opened Tate minus 280, the comeback on Nunes plus 220, and right now over at 5 dimes, it is Tate minus 260, the comeback on Nunes is that same plus 220. So line margins continue to tighten. This fight has been up for a while as well. To me, this is a pretty simple, clear-cut fight. I mean, Nunes is going to definitely be dangerous early on. Tate has to weather the storm, but if she gets the fight to the ground, it's a wrap. I mean, Tate is definitely the superior ground fighter here. She can get top position and rain down some punishment on Nunes, or she could take her back and submit her that way as well. And Tate knows that she's going to have to pull off something like she did against Holm in her last fight. Obviously, it was tough to get Holm to the ground, and she did it a couple times, though, and had Holm in all sorts of problems, and then obviously was able to finish that fight. She's going to have to do that early on here against Nunes, or wait till Nunes starts slowing up and kind of weather the storm. It is going to be dangerous, for sure, for Tate early on, because Nunes is such an aggressive fighter. It's such a powerful fighter. I mean, she has 9 KOs on her resume for a record. I mean, she's that devastating. One of the best finishers on the feet or even on the ground with ground and pound in the ladies division for sure. But skill set for skill set, she really should not beat Tate in this fight. I mean, Tate has been in there with some of the best, obviously, in the world. She's a champion for a reason. She shows a ton of heart, and her ability to to fight smart and know what she has to do to win a fight is probably what's going to get her through here. So I'm expecting Tate to get this fight to the ground. And once she does, again, she probably finishes Nunes, whether it's round 1, round 2, it's probably going to be in one of those rounds. So Nunes basically has that puncher's type of chance, and it is a dangerous and a decent little shot. That's why, I mean, it's a competitive line for a title fight. I mean, obviously, if you think about it, a line that's under 3-1 means that the dog definitely has a shot to win. But I do think that Tate comes away with the win. I mean, it would be a decent upset outside of what the current line is now. I think it would almost be, in the public opinion, to be a bigger upset than even that, in fact. So Tate should get the job done here. I mean, it would be a shame if she loses this fight and doesn't get a shot at a bigger fight with possibly another Rousey rematch or even a home rematch or something along that line. I know a lot of people are looking forward to some possible matchups with Tate in the future, but she has to get by Nunes here. So I think she does do that, and I think it is by submission along the way. So my pick is going to be Tate to win by submission over Nunes.
Miesha Tate is so much better than Amanda Nunes if you factor in the wrestling and the conditioning and the heart. Now, in a pure stand-up fight, I'd favor Amanda Nunes. I mean, her stand-up is very powerful. She can take a punch. She's extremely aggressive. I mean, her debut in Strikeforce was one of the scariest debuts I've ever seen, where she was able to just get right in Julia Budd's face, knock her down, and put her out. And that was at 145 pounds, and Budd has gone on to become one of the better women's featherweights in the world. So that just shows how dangerous Amanda Nunes is capable of being. Now, that being said, Nunes definitely has her flaws. When she gets taken down, she is not very good defensively. Alexis Davis made mincemeat out of her on the ground. Her conditioning is not very good. She started off amazing against Zingano, but when she couldn't finish her on the ground, Zingano was able to turn the tables and then just absolutely obliterate her from top position on the ground. So Nunes is a flawed fighter. Now, Miesha Tate, you know, the game plan is there, but she has to follow it. She can't screw around. Like, look at Sarah McMahon, an Olympic silver medalist in wrestling. All she had to do was not get knocked down and then eventually take Nunes down and beat her. And what does she do? She screws around too long on the feet, gets knocked down, and gets submitted. So Nunes is definitely capable of winning this fight. Miesha Tate does not have the greatest chin. She's been rocked and knocked out and knocked down multiple times throughout her career. So there is definitely a viable path for Nunes. But that being said, if Miesha Tate can weather that early storm or even just avoid the early storm entirely by getting a takedown, this fight's over. Nunes does not have the conditioning for 3 rounds, whether alone 5. I mean, you just look at her last fight against Shevchenko. She won the first 2 convincingly, and then Shevchenko got right back into the fight in the 3rd round because Nunes started to slow down. So if Miesha Tate has not been finished in the first 2 rounds, this fight's over. At some point, Tate will get the takedown. Tate will put her out. And I do favor Miesha Tate to win this fight, and I think she does so in convincing fashion, probably by submission or knockout on the ground in the 3rd round. Now moving on to the co-main event of the evening, we have an incredible attraction in the heavyweight division as former champion Brock Lesnar returns with a 5-3 record. He takes on New Zealand's Mark Hunt, who is 12-10-1. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Up in Hunt -150 to come back as Lesnar +120. Right now, over at 5 dimes, it is Hunt -170. The comeback on Lesnar is +150. So more support coming in Hunt's way. There's a book actually that put up Lesnar, I believe, as the favorite around 2-1, and the public quickly pounced on that line and flipped it. And obviously, Hunt is now a steady favorite everywhere across the market. So to give them credit, the place that kind of butchered the opening line originally, it is a tough line to set. I mean, with the Lesnar hype, with his marketability, with his popularity from WWE and what he's accomplished even in the UFC, being the former champion, just the popularity factor overall, it's hard to tell whether the general bettors out there, and maybe not the sharp MMA minds out there, but just the general action is going to favor Lesnar and in the amount that it would overwhelm any sharp action coming in on Hunt anyway. So it is a tough line to set, tough spot to set as well, especially if you also consider the stylistic matchup. I mean, you have Lesnar, who is a beast on the ground, obviously with his wrestling pedigree, taking on a guy like Hunt, which is one of the best and most devastating strikers in the heavyweight division, really of all time. I mean, the guy is a stud, knocking people out left and right. Tons of power, and he's improved. I mean, he's one of these fighters that Hunt has been putting the work in, and he got himself to be at this position right here because he's put the work in and he got the takedown defense up to par where he's not getting bullied, with the exception of fights like Stipe. I mean, along the way, he's looked pretty good. It's hard to take Hunt down, and if you can't take him down, you're probably in a lot of trouble standing up with him. So that's how he gets the job done. So stylistically, you have a wrestler versus a striker, and a lot of people believe that Hunt's takedown defense is good enough that he should be able to keep it upright against Lesnar, and Lesnar does not like to get hit. We all know that. I mean, a lot of people are saying, and yes, sure, it's true. Who likes to get hit, though? I mean, I keep on hearing that, but you show me a person that truly likes to get blasted by an elite striker, and I think you're going to see a crazy person there. There's no way. None of these guys like getting blasted. So anyway, but Lesnar definitely, he doesn't absorb the punches, or he kind of, if you look at the Overeem fight, you look at some of his past performances, yes, there is a different level there, but he has shown heart at the same time. Look at the Carwin fight in that position. I mean, that comeback was remarkable, the Lesnar showed. So it all depends on who's able to implement their style the best. Can Lesnar get this fight to the ground? If he's able to get Hunt down, I think Lesnar wins fight. I know that Hunt, again, his takedown defense and his ability to defend from subs has gotten better, but Lesnar's a different type of beast when you're talking about wrestler. I mean, a different type of guy to have on top of you. He's going to rain down some punishment. Hunt, I don't think he's going to fare too well if Lesnar is on top. And then, even though he's more known for being that powerful guy, he does have a little bit of submission skill. I mean, Lesnar's the type of guy, I think if he gets on top, he might look for that arm triangle choke again, or he might look to finish this fight by Kimura. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he does that. So Lesnar on the ground is not a good thing, but Hunt on the feet is obviously not a good thing for Lesnar either. I mean, Lesnar cannot fight with Hunt standing up. Hunt will lay him out. He will knock him out if this fight plays out on the feet for a long period of time. There's no question about that either. So it's basically pick your poison, who's going to implement the plan. I think Lesnar can get this fight to the ground. I'm going to go against the grain again in this spot here, and I'm going to pick Lesnar to win. I think his age and his time off does bother me a little bit, because even though Hunt's older, he's still been obviously a little bit more active. And I mean, he is more of a true MMA fighter than Lesnar is. He's still to this point, but I think that Lesnar has enough left in the tank. He knows what he has to do to win this fight. I don't think Hunt is going to be able to kind of sprawl and brawl, especially early on. I think Lesnar is going to get the fight to the ground. If he does, I think he's going to have success doing so. So I'm going to pull the upset card here, and I think Lesnar is going to shock everybody by pulling off a quality win against a very game Mark Hunt in spot. So my pick is going to be Lesnar to beat Hunt.
What makes this fight so interesting is the fact that Brock Lesnar is a complete freak of nature. And this guy is one of the greatest athletes of all time. Just a former NCAA heavyweight champ. The guy walked onto the Vikings and was one of the last round of cuts. And he did that after a motorcycle accident. The guy can compete with the best in the world in whatever he wants to do. And then he goes to the UFC, and in his fourth professional fight, he's the freaking champion of the world. So Brock Lesnar is incredible. That being said, I am definitely concerned about his return. I mean, the last time we saw him, the last two times we saw him, he did not look good. Obviously, he had his issues with the diverticulitis, with his inability to eat a healthy diet, lost some of his colon after some surgery, and then Cain Velasquez absolutely obliterated him to take his title. Lesnar got one takedown, and then that was it. And then when Lesnar finally did return a year later, he took on Alistair Overeem and got completely obliterated again. Just sat there and hardly did anything in that fight. Just ate a big kick to the body and then folded in half and got finished. So that is a huge concern here. Is Lesnar going to have that same deer in the headlights look that he had when he fought Alistair Overeem? Or have 4 years of him going and crushing in the WWE and throwing opponents around and dominating and regaining that aura of invincibility, has that kind of given him his confidence back. Now, Lesnar is still an incredible athlete. If he wants to utilize that wrestling, there's a good chance he'll be able to do it. I don't know if he'll be able to keep Mark Hunt down for the whole fight, but he is an incredibly big and strong man. I mean, he's got 9 inches in reach on Hunt. He's 5 inches taller. So if Lesnar wants to get inside, he probably can, especially with how explosive he is. So that is my main concern, is Mark Hunt is not a tremendous athlete. So if Hunt is not able to thwart those takedowns, you're going to see 3 straight rounds of Mark Hunt getting the crap kicked out of him on the ground with those lunge pails that Brock Lesnar calls fists. That being said, if Lesnar can't get the fight to the ground, he is not a great stand-up artist. I mean, yeah, he hurt Randy Couture on the feet. Yeah, he hurt Heath Herring with one punch that he threw. But for the most part, in extended stand-up exchanges, I mean, Mark Hunt is a former K1 kickboxing champion. If Brock Lesnar gets stuck trading, standing and banging with this guy, he's going to be in huge trouble, especially with how tough Mark Hunt is. So, realistically, I just can't quite get over how poor Brock looked the last times we saw him in the octagon. And I think he's going to have some bad flashbacks the second he gets cracked again. So I'm leaning Mark Hunt. I'm going to side with them, but I can understand why people would think that Lesnar might be able to take somebody like Mark Hunt to Suplex City. But I am leaning Mark Hunt, and I'm going to pick him. Now this brings us to the main event of the evening, as the UFC light heavyweight titles will be unified, as current champion Daniel Cormier, who is 17-1, takes on former champion and current interim champion Jon Jones, who is 22-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Up in Jones, minus 300. The comeback on Cormier, plus 240. Right now it is minus 290 on Jones. Cormier is plus 245. Line margins tighten up a little bit. And it looks like across the market, on Don Best right now on the screen, it's about 3-1 roughly. There is a spot that has 255 out there, so a little wacky, but overall you're going to see about 3-1 ballpark number out there. Tough fight because, I mean, obviously these guys have a history together. Their first fight was competitive. I know a lot of people think that, a lot of people say that, it was a clear fight. Jones kind of rolled over Cormier easy. It was a competitive fight. It was, especially early on. It was competitive. And as it went a little bit, Jones started taking over. So yes, he deserved to get the nod. But it was still, like I said, a pretty decent performance from both guys. I mean, these guys are definitely the top 2 at light heavyweights in the world that deserve to be there. They both deserve to get a shot at the belt again. Jon Jones, arguably, I mean, pound for pound, a lot of people think he's the best fighter in the world. He's up there for sure. Well, my 2 cents, I like Demetrius Johnson as the top guy. But anyway, that being said, a lot of people, you can make a case for people believing Jones is. I mean, the level of competition that he's been through since being the light heavyweight champion is amazing. I mean, he's beat the who's who in the division, cleared out a lot of great names. So I understand it. And Jones, again, he has a win over Cormier here. It's going to be a tough fight for Cormier again. I do believe that Jones is more motivated. He seems to be in great shape. Of course, his OSP fight was a little bit of a lackluster performance. A lot of people believe that he had some ring rust there. Still, OSP is not an easy fight, not an easy out. I know a lot of people were probably expecting Jones to finish OSP there. OSP, you got to give him credit. He survived it. Yeah, it wasn't one of Jones's best performances, but I think that still was kind of a needed 5-round hard-fought battle, especially with the time off, especially with all the issues Jones had in his personal life. But he is going to face a very motivated Cormier, a guy that has a little bit more confidence, especially seeing that fight against OSP in his last fight, Jones. I think that did give Cormier a little bit more confidence as well, thinking, hey, this guy doesn't look up to par. If that was me, Cormier even said it himself, if that was me, I would have won that fight. And yeah, that's possible, but I think Jones is going to be prepared here, and Jones still presents a lot of problems for a guy like Cormier. So it is going to be a tough fight. I'm expecting a very competitive fight here. it is hard to trust Jones right now. I can't believe I'm saying that. I mean, because there are some question marks around him, but there's also some question marks around Cormier. He's not getting younger. I mean, the guy's 37 years old. He is going to hit that decline spot. Father Time gets us all. And I think Cormier is going to hit that as well. I know he's working hard. He's motivated. He's going to show up to fight, but still, I think Jones is going to look better again. I think he's going to edge this fight out. Will it be a finish? I'm not sure. Cormier is a tough guy to finish, but if it hits the scorecards, I think Jones edges another maybe 3-2 type decision, maybe 4-1, but a competitive 4-1 type of decision. And I think he gets the job done. Or if there is a finish, it's probably Jones getting the job done there as well. So I'm not going to count Cormier out completely. I do respect the guy. Again, he is worthy of wearing that strap, but I just think that he met his match against a guy like Jon Jones. And even though he can be competitive with Jones, I just don't think he gets over that hump and beats him. So I'm going to pick Jon Jones to get the W here.
Jon Jones has this crazy ability to go out there and beat his opponent at their own game. You've seen it multiple times where, people talked about Chael Sonnen. He's going to wrestle Jon Jones. Chael Sonnen was hyping up the wrestling. What did Jon Jones do? Take him down, beat him up on the ground. Daniel Cormier saying he's going to, outwork Jones. He's going to make Jones quit. He's going to push the pace. He's going to get on the inside. So what does Jones do? He basically fights 5 rounds with Cormier in the clinch on the inside, negates his entire massive reach advantage, and wins. Wins 4 of the 5 rounds, even after taking an early beating. Like, it was just all worth it for him to say that he beat his opponent at their own game. Now, is Jon Jones going to try to do that this time around, or has he started to wisen up a little bit and maybe try to follow an easier path for victory? We're going to find out on Saturday night. But that being said, after returning, Jon Jones did look extremely rusty against OSP. Even though he won all 5 rounds against Ovince St. Preux, this was not the dominant Jon Jones of old. He was working things from the outside, landing a lot of kicks. He was throwing jabs. But he very rarely engaged on the inside. He very rarely looked for the big takedowns. And when he did have the takedown, he had OSP on the ropes, and he let him off the hook and then never went back after it again. So it was extremely frustrating. I think the Jon Jones of old would have been able to tear through Ovince St. Preux in about 3 rounds. But this time they went all 5. And the last 2 in particular were very frustrating because OSP seemed like he had almost given up and Jones just could not pull the trigger. So we'll see. If Jones has kind of gotten over that, shaken it off, then he's going to be in great shape here because Daniel Cormier is just not quite up to Jones's caliber. Cormier's chin isn't granite. Cormier got worn down by Jon Jones, could not keep up with Jones's pace in that first fight. But stranger things have happened. I mean, who'd have thought that after how badly Michael Bisping got destroyed by Luke Rockhold the first time, that he would come back and knock him out in the first round and win the UFC middleweight title. So I'm not completely counting Daniel Cormier out because he is very powerful, extremely strong, and can just keep going and going, and he has no quit in him whatsoever. But that being said, I do think that Jon Jones is going to get right back at it. I think Jones's confidence is high. I think Cormier, even though he's talking about how he would have beat Jones in the OSP fight, I still think he's shook by the fact that one in his 17-1 record is Jon Jones. And I think Jon Jones is in Cormier's head, and I think Jon Jones is going to do some serious damage, even if it does get on the inside. I think Jones employs his elbows a little bit more this time around, and we've seen Cormier now get rocked in fights. I mean, obviously he got dropped by Anthony Johnson when he initially won the title, and then he got in some serious trouble against Alexander Gustafsson as well. So maybe Jon Jones could finish Cormier if he connects with just the right amount of combinations or elbows. So I'm leaning Jon Jones, and I think that he does leave UFC 200 as the victor in the main event. So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC 200. Part 2 of the Premium Oddscast featuring our premium bets will be out this week potentially even before the UFC weigh-ins, maybe after the UFC Fight Night 90 weigh-ins, as we give them out all in a lump sum. So stay tuned for that if you're an MMA Oddsbreaker Premium member. Also, if you'd like to become a premium member, just go to MMAOddsbreaker.com and you can sign up on the top right corner of our homepage. If we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow at MMAOB Premium on Twitter, because that's where we'll post them first. We can also notify you of all of our free bets via email alert if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsbreaker.com and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Special thanks to our sponsor, 5 Dimes Sportsbook. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.